In this episode, we're privileged to be joined by Mariana Satanas, a trailblazer who, originally from London, has left an incredible mark on iconic brands like Net-a-Porter, Bottega Veneta, and more. Now, as the president of Hanro in New York, she's driving digital transformation in the fashion and retail industry. As Mariana is based in New York, this marks our very first virtual podcast. Join us as we dive into her incredible journey and uncover the insights that have propelled her to the top. Stay tuned for an hour of inspiration and wisdom. Please like and subscribe. First of all, thank you so much, Mariana, for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Pleasure.
And I just wanted to start off right at the beginning because you've had such an incredible career, and it seems as though you've moved really, really quickly to the top. So I want to start right at the beginning, which I understand you started off in web design.
Correct. Yeah.
So tell me how it all came about, how you started, and what made you want to get into web design initially?
Yeah. Well, it all started with my father. He was a fashion designer. He studied at Central St Martin in London. And in the late 70s, he opened up like his first factory. So he was designing, producing, and then when I came along, he opened like a second brand, which was the more elevated brand. So he was already doing like evening dresses, but like the label that he created when I was born was more like cocktail, and yeah, definitely more the elevated brand. So when my friends were out having fun in summer, I was in the factory helping out, bagging, ticketing, so I basically saw it all. I used to love spending time with the designers and then like cutting the fabrics, and I was very lucky because I saw the whole kind of story, right, of like the inspiration of the design, and then like how you source the materials, and then what made it special. And yeah, it was great. And then I think that's when it was always in my blood. But then the recession hit, and like a lot of people, my father did suffer. So I was like, oh, do you know what? When it came to like doing my GCSEs, I was like, oh, I really want to get into fashion, but I'm not sure because I've seen how kind of turmoil it can be. So I wasn't sure at that point what I wanted to do. But instead of doing history, I did art for my GCSEs that my teachers weren't that happy about. They're like, you're an A-class student. Why are you choosing art? And I'm like, well, I've got A in art as well. And they were like, no, you need to go history. And I was like, well, I didn't tell you to so I don't control the curriculum. If I had a choice, if I could, I would do both, but I can't. So anyway, but then when I finished school, I really wanted to get into graphic design. So I thought, okay, that way I can still be close to fashion, like working for magazines. And at that time, the web wasn't around. So I was like, I can still be near my passion by doing something else I'm passionate about. So that's how I entered doing graphic design at college. And then when I went to university, there was this thing called the internet that kind of exploded. And it was just before the dot-com bust. So, we kind of learned how to web design at uni, and also like doing a few things. And it's on an old program called Flash. So I really liked the animation, but I didn't want to get into film. And I was like, okay, I've definitely chosen the right career from this, or like the right degree to do. And then from there, once I left uni, it was tough getting an actual job in graphic design because the competition was so fierce. Like it was a lot. And then I had a lucky break. My cousin's, her boss, their business was basically developing and implementing like POS systems in stores. And they also had like a order management system and product management system. And a lot of their clients at the time were asking like for websites. So my cousin knew that I did graphics. She's like, are you interested in doing web design? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure. And then I just basically got thrown into the deep end because not only was I going to be designing the websites, I was also basically going to be developing them. And I had not coded like a day in my life. As like I kind of taught myself how to code. Back then it was much more simpler than what it was now. And yeah, essentially it just started from there. So I was there for and what I loved about that job is because it was a smaller business, I was able to kind of talk to the clients. So I was looking at their whole kind of like business, and like it was literally in every detail, like what the products, like how you're going to ship, like what's the costing, like what's your brand, like how we can do emails. It was just like full thing without me even really knowing it. But then after about 3 years, I was like, okay, you know what? I love this, but I need to go to a bigger company.
So then was that your transition to Net-a-Porter?
Correct. Yeah.
So how did you get that job?
So I'll never forget it. It was like August bank holiday, and I was just telling my friends, like, I was like, oh, I need to start looking for a job. I don't know what to do. And then a good friend, we actually went to the pub, and she's like, you know what? Matt, her boyfriend, now husband at the time, was like, I've actually got a job opening at Net-a-Porter. And I'm like, oh my God, like who buys like $1,000 handbags or shoes online? Like, really? And he's like, no, he's like, Mariana, like, he's like, honestly, I'm going to put you forward. And it was to be a part of like the web production team in tech.
Amazing.
So I was like, okay, fine. I was just a bit like, I'm not going to get it. Like, I was like, all right, but whatever. I'm gonna put my best foot forward.
So what was the interview process like? I mean, if you were introduced by somebody who was there, I mean, you know, was it easier? Was there a specific process? What happened?
I mean, he's a recruiter anyway, so they approached him. So they they knew him, they trusted him. So it was set my CV in. Matt was like, he highly recommended me. And then I had about two interviews. At that point, like it was 2006. So Net-a-Porter had been around for like 5 years, but it was still early days. They just opened the DC in the US. And I think I was like the 120th employer. Can't quite remember, but it was like the early days. And there was like 20 people in tech. By the time I left, there was over like 400. So
unbelievable.
Yeah, it was literally met with, and I'll never forget it because it was in Bayswater. Like the office wasn't, which was crazy because like it's an online business, and sure, the offices are on top of like a mall, right? So, but
on top of what's the name?
Whiteley's.
Whiteley's, that's right. Because now it's obviously at Westfield. Yeah. So that's where it was. Okay, fine.
Yeah. So like I went and it was like you had like your interview in like this glass like room, and then I was like, okay, met with one of my colleagues and like the manager at the time, and he was the one who was like leaving, and they just needed someone else. Yeah, that was the first interview, and then they called me back a couple of days later, went back into the same room, and I could see in the boardroom again. It was like just it's glass, and you can see about 20 people in there, and then it was of the same people, but now it was like with the head of tech as well. And then he came over, and it was quite casual, to be honest with you. What was more important to them as opposed to like, I was like, I know how to code, but I wouldn't say it's my strongest point. But they were like, that's fine, we can help you. But it was more about the fit and the culture. And whether I would basically be the right fit. And yeah, I was.
You was.
It was great. And essentially, I always say, like, I graduated from Net-a-Porter. Like, when I left, I was like, this has been my learning.
That's a really good way to put it, because, we say this all the time, even with retail, like when we hire people in retail and we see that they've come from certain places, we're like, that was a brilliant school. Do you feel that experience has shaped the way you work now?
100%,
is it,
100%. Yeah, get goosebumps even talking about it. Yeah. It was such a special time for the business. Growth was just unbelievable. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't always easy. There were like hard times, but for the majority, it was just amazing. It was just one of the best experiences of my life. Some people say that it was, it's a blessing, and what's the saying? It's a blessing and a curse at the same time, because I'm very blessed to experience that. And then it's the curse because everywhere else I've been, you're trying to replicate it, but you never will. And I've only accepted that now.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's the case with so many people. When you've worked for such an amazing business and you've been such a pivotal part of their growth, it's difficult to you know, obviously you move on and you progress in your career, but that is always sort of embedded in you, that experience, and you sort of take it with you wherever you are. So a question I want to ask you is that, was there any particular sort of skill or just overview or knowledge from that time in your early career that has proven really valuable in your leadership roles within the industry from there on?
From a leadership perspective, don't be afraid to fail. Keep it simple and don't be afraid to fail. As long as you learn, and then the next time you improve, which isn't necessarily always a case in retail, depending on leadership. What was also kind of instilled was, you know, sometimes we would work in silos and that never works. So communication is key. At the end of the day, you're one team, regardless of what department you're in. You've all got the same goal. So it's like working in partnership with your colleagues. And one thing that was really installed in us and to everyone was like the customer is at the heart of everything that we do.
I think that's the case across retail. I think if you've got that mindset and that attitude, regardless of whatever position you hold, and everybody in your team is aligned with that, you're going to be successful.
100%. Like it starts like with, you know, it's your customers and it's your people. And when you have a leadership team that appreciates that and understands that, it's magical.
You then took a massive leap.
Yeah.
And got on an aeroplane.
I got an aeroplane.
And went to New York. And as we were speaking about just before we started recording, I mean, my favourite place in the world. Talk me through that transition. What happened and how did you feel about it? How nervous or not nervous were you when going across?
It was a roller coaster of emotions. So at that time, Net-a-Porter just announced that we were going to be merging with Yux, which kind of shook everyone up a bit. Well, a lot, actually, not a bit. Especially people who'd been there like for many, many years, and like we'd actually built, like, it wasn't just Net-a-Porter, it was the Outet, it was Mr. Porter. Like, and me, I pushed the button to like put the Outet live and to put Mr. Porter live. Like, it was just, it was quite an emotional time. So I was approached by a recruiter who basically said that there's a brand under LVMH, they're based in New York. They're looking for a VP of e-com and CRM. Would you be interested? I'm like, oh, is it this brand? Because I've already been approached by them. And he was like, no, it's DKNY. And I'm like, what? Okay, fine. And I was like, yeah, doesn't hurt to have a conversation. And the recruiter was in New York, right? So this is just over phone. And so I had a call with them. I had a call with the chief branding officer, who was my manager. And he then came to England with the CMO. And I will never forget it. We were in Berners Tavern in the West End. And what should have been like an hour, maybe 40-minute conversation ended up being like an hour and a half. Chemistry was there, his vision was there, like we were aligned. And I was like, wow, okay, like I'm quite surprised. And then literally I met with the CMO all in the same day, and I was like, okay, there's something here. And I left, I went and met my friends, and I just basically said to them, I'm like, I'm moving to New York. I know I've just had my first interview, but I know this is going to happen. I just had that feeling. I don't know what came over me. I don't know what it was. I just had that feeling. I didn't question it. Did not.
Well, you must have been pretty special for them to all come over here to see you, because normally they would ship you over there.
They had some other business to do, but yeah, they were. It was weird. Like looking back, like I didn't even think twice. Didn't even think twice. So when I finally, and so the process, so it was about like 2 months, the whole process, 2-3 months. And when I got the job, Like I did tell my parents that I was having this conversation. My dad, being my dad, was like, yeah, you got to go for it. My mum was kind of freaking out. But then when I got it, I was just like ecstatic. It was no question in my mind.
Had you been before? Did you like New York? And...
Yeah, I'd been before. Yeah, and I actually, the first time I came to New York was in '99, when I was at uni, and we just did like a life drawing session in some diner near Washington Square Park, and then we went to Washington Square Park, and I turned around to my friend and I was like, you know what, I think New York's the only other city that I could live. Just randomly, because I'm a Londoner. I'm born and raised in London, right? So, you know, never had I wanted to move abroad. Only like when I retired. Like, that was the only time. But never imagined it. And that moment when I got on the plane to leave London, that moment popped into my head, and I was like, did I make this happen? Like,
you manifested it.
Like, all those years that I said it, like, is this what happened? So yeah, it was hard. It wasn't easy. Even though I knew instantly that I was going to go, it was hard. It was a hard decision. You know, my friends that I had that were like, we thought we were going to bury you in a Mr. Poor suit, like, sleep, because like I was just so invested, you know, and I loved the company. I'm like, you know what, had an amazing run, and all my leadership team are leaving. Now's the best time to go.
But how did they find it when you resigned? How was that conversation? You must have been petrified.
So my boss was a managing director of Mr. Porter at the time, and he was away. Oh God, I got away. It's like 2 weeks till he's back. And then people start to find out. I'm like, I told one person, and I literally, everyone's talking, what the hell? But the joke is, when I told all my close friends there, and I was like, listen, I've got something to tell you. So I got something to tell you too. I'm like, what? She's like, I'm moving to New York. I'm like, so am I.
Well, at least you had a network already. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, okay. So when it came to tell my boss, it was a Friday, and we had like our catch-ups over lunch. And honestly, it felt like I was breaking up with someone. Like, it was just so emotional. Because
did you cry?
A very long time. Yeah, I did. And, you know, we've been through a lot together. So it's like, oh my God. But he was so supportive. And I'd always said, like, I'm not going to be that person who's going to go and resign because I want more money, right? Or because I want another position. I need to be having those conversations beforehand. And if I can't have those conversations with my boss beforehand, then something is fundamentally wrong. I wouldn't disrespect him like that. So essentially, he was just like, it's a promotion, it's more money, you're in New York.
It's a life-changing experience that you're about to have. Yeah.
And he was so gracious, and he's like, I'm just so proud of you. He's like, I'm just so proud of you. Yeah.
That's amazing. No, I was to say, so you arrived there.
Yeah.
And the biggest, baddest city in the world, and you had this brand new role that you had to start. You had to find, I'm assuming, new place to live, obviously.
Yeah.
Brand new business. Everyone's expecting, you know, this incredible Mariana to turn up and do this incredible job. Did you find anything particularly challenging? Was there a time where you thought, oh my God, I've made a mistake? Or was it just smooth sailing?
No, definitely wasn't smooth sailing. So I arrived and then literally had 2 weeks later, there was a massive snowstorm. I was like, what the hell is this? You can't even go outside. I also found out a few personal things from my family when I was out there regarding my dad's health, and I was like, I'll just come back. And my dad was like, no. I'm like, but you knew before Christmas, you knew before I left. Why didn't you tell me? He's like, because I know I knew you so you wouldn't go. So, and you need to do this. So, you know, I was torn.
Yeah.
Actually, backtrack. When I got the job 2 days after, my dad had a heart attack.
Wow.
So I was like, I'm not going.
Wow.
He's like, you're going. If this has taught you, life's too short. I was like, okay. And then in the January 2016, I found out he had cancer. But because he had the heart attack, they were doing all these scans, they found it early. So stage 1. So I was like, okay, I'll get on with it. So yeah, so I was dealing with that on a personal level. And then like I had a few friends over here, so that was good. And then one of my good friend who I kind of grew up with, she'd been here for like 8 years at that time or 10 years. So she was like well acclimatized to New York.
Yeah.
The shock was the American corporate culture.
Very different to UK.
And a good friend of mine before I left, she was American. She's like, the American culture's, the American corporate culture's going to shock you. I don't know if you're going to handle it. And I'm like, we work with Americans every day. What are you talking about? And she's like, no, it's going to be different. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just know what happened. I didn't let it faze me. But yeah, it was very different.
In what way specifically was a key moment you thought, wow, okay, this is what she's talking about?
Not necessarily people, but just how things were organised and expectations. And no one went for a drink on a Friday. I'm like, what's going on? We all live in the sea. Let's go for a drink. So I started doing that with my team, and then other people started to join. It's like, you know, just at the pub,
changed it up.
He changed it up, put a bit of freshness in there. But yeah, no, it was tough because also my boss like resigned after like 5 weeks of me being there.
Was this the person that you met that really, you know, that you felt you had the connection with?
Yeah, I was like, what the hell? Like, I literally just lived my whole life over, not just changed jobs, moved my whole life. But, you know, I didn't let that fate, I was like, you know what, I know what I'm doing. I had a big challenge.
You must have had an incredible amount of focus to, you know, get through what you were going through personally, move to a new city completely, start a new job, deal with the fact that, you know, your boss who really attracted you to the role is now left. You know, it must have been really difficult. So it just shows, you know, resilience on your side.
Yeah. I mean, and I also had a massive project. We were re-platforming and redesigning, as well as implementing a new CRM system. So, like, I had a big task there. And I'm like, you know what? I know what I'm doing. Like, I know the vision, and we're just going to do it. And we did.
Sometimes having that is an escape, actually, and helps you to get through what you're going through personally.
Yeah.
You know you've got something massive going on at work. You know, you can really dive into it and use it as an escape. And it's clear that, you know, it's made a success of you with that mindset, which is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, you know, don't get me wrong, like from like an emotional level, you know, you're up and down. I was lucky enough though that I was going back home like every 2-3 months, like for work, or going to Paris for work and then just going via London. So like it was good. And also all my friends, like my apartment was like a hotel. I'd have people were always coming over.
Everybody was coming to see you.
Yeah, I'm like, I see you more now than I did when I was in London. And you know, everyone comes to New York for work, so it was great. And New York in summer is just like, it's just so fun. Like, and I made a good network of people, like of friends, and within the industry as well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
No, so you were at DKNY for your initial part in New York, but then your career took a little bit of an unpredictable sort of turn, and you went to work for the On McPherson wellness brand. Which, you know, is obviously different from fashion because it's wellness supplements and something completely different. So how did that come about?
So after DKNY, I went and worked for a few other fashion brands, and then essentially I was consulting for Barney's, and then the consultancy, like my contract came to an end, and I was approached, well, actually a friend of mine who works for like a performance marketing agency, he's like, look, I know they're looking for someone, like it's a GM of sales and marketing, would you be interested? I was like, I don't know if I want to go and work. It wasn't wellness. I was just like, I don't know if I want to go and work for a celebrity brand. But when I met actually the co-founder, Andrea Harwood, and she was CEO, like it was amazing. Like another inspiration. Like the vision of this woman and the creativeness, like, and she's a businesswoman as well, and her passion. I'm like, I want to come and work for you. Like, I'm going to learn from you, you know? And because they were based in Australia, Perth, again, everything was done, you know, over Zoom. But she came to New York as well during the interview process because we were opening the first store in New York, in Soho. So she had to come for that. And I loved her in person, more in person than I did over like Zoom. And yeah, it didn't, I wasn't, you know, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's beauty, it's supplements, it's, you know, do I know enough about the product? But I could learn about the product, right? You can always learn about product.
We say this a lot, actually, because especially in retail, in fashion, you know, sometimes people are nervous to hire somebody who hasn't worked with exactly the same product previously. But I think if you're great at what you do in general, whether that's sales, whatever it is, yeah, the product is something exactly what you said. It can be learned. You know, product knowledge is something that if somebody's willing to apply themselves, they can really get embedded into it and learn everything there is to know about it and become passionate about it. So, you know, it really doesn't matter, you know, if you haven't worked with that product before. And that's a clear example of that. But during your time there, how do you feel that this experience specifically contributed to your career growth from there forward?
It was the first time where I had the store team reporting to me.
Right.
And, you know, the web team were in Perth, but they still reported to me. And so even though, like with previous brands, you know, you had stores, but I was involved from a CRM perspective, but not really on the day-to-day running of it. So this was really the first opportunity where, you know, I learned that. And it's tough. It's tough running a store. Like, there's so much to learn and there's so much to do. And that's when I really became omni-channel. Yeah, I hate that word. It's been around for so many years. Not that I hate it. It's just like, but really and truly, that's my mindset started to change. And it was great because our offices were actually in store. So I can hear like the customer interaction, like with my team and like what they were looking for and how personal it was versus like online. So I'm like, okay, how can we create that experience, like that more personal experience online when you don't have a human talking to you? That's when I started growing, essentially.
From that and taking it into a new direction. So I want to go into more about your leadership positions, because obviously you then worked for Bottega Veneta, which is obviously one of the most prestigious brands in the luxury retail field. Of course, you've been at Net-a-Porter, but could you share how you found that transition from being part of a team, essentially? I know you just did, being part of the team, but to then leading the team. What was that feeling like? What was the challenges that came with that?
At Wellco or in my current position?
In general, in your leadership roles.
Well, I'm a Scorpio, so I'm a natural leader. So I don't know. I think when I first went into a leadership role, I didn't overthink it. I'm like, I know what needs to happen. I need to communicate that with my team and essentially work as a team. It's not like, okay, here you go, this is what you need to do, and like lead them to it, right? It's giving them clear guidance of like, this is what we need to do, this is the goal, and this is what we need it done by. Let's discuss. Which is the thing I learned from Net-a-Porter. It was like, you know, we've got a project to do. It was all heads of the teams, departments getting in a room. Let's talk about it. How we're going to do this, what's the vision, when do we need it by? Like, it was just everyone working together. And I think that's what I've taken into my leadership role. It's, you need your teams to work together.
And play each other to their strengths.
Well, of course. And, you know, some people are great at doing one thing, the other person's great at doing another, and know your strengths and weaknesses. I don't know everything. I'm not good at everything, right? So I lean to my team. They're the experts in their field.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why you hire them, essentially. But can you share some specific highlights? I mean, obviously you're in a great role now, which we'll go on to, but up until this point, can you share some real amazing highlights from your roles across, you know, DKNY, Net-a-Porter, Bottega, and obviously Wellco? Is there anything that really stands out to you that you think, wow, that was a real incredible time in my career?
Yeah, there's a few. Yeah. Mostly from the Outet, but all right. So it's when we launched the Outnet. This is just. I mean, I've got too many, but like this is one of them. Well, I'll tell you two actually. So it's basically 4:00 in the morning. We've all been working hard, still at the office because we're launching the Outnet, and obviously you've got to launch like at a specific time, right?
Yeah.
Before everyone is awake, essentially. And I'll never forget. Like we're just all working hard. I don't know what kind of mindset we're at. And, you know, our founder, like Nasty, comes along with like a tea trolley. And she's like, tea anyone? And it's like
At 4 a.m.
hey, what do you like? Yeah, sure, please, give me a coffee. I need to like keep on going. And it was an incredible moment because it's like, you know what? You're the founder of this business and you are here with us. Like it's 4:00 in the morning. We started work at 8 the previous day and you're here serving us tea.
Well, that's so encouraging because they're there with you to be a part of it.
But this is it. Yeah. And it wasn't like and pressing the button, making it go live. Yeah. I mean, that was another big, you know, thing. But it's essentially having your leader, the one who's on top, right at the top, being there with you. And that will always stick with me. The other thing from Net-a-Porter was when like we were asked to submit like a business case. And I submit like just for an idea, and I submitted one for a men's online store.
Well,
and so had a few other people. And basically then we'll put it all in a room a month later and said, well, congratulations, you are now going to be all working on Project Y. We're like, what the hell is Project Y? And the leadership team didn't want everyone to know, but essentially we were going to start a men's business.
Well, okay.
So I got to work on Mr. Porter like literally even 2 years before it came into like development. And that was incredible.
Yeah, I can imagine. It must be so proud of that.
Yeah. Oh, I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Unbelievable. I wanted to ask you, sorry, no, if you've got more, I want to hear them.
I mean, there's a lot. I think also when we launched DKNY and the replatforming and redesign, I was like, I'm going to do this in 9 months. Everyone's like, no, you're not going to do it in 9 months. I'm like, we're going to do it in 9 months. It's like, we will do it.
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Of course you
did. And implementing a new CRM system. And I was like, when you have the right people behind you, when you have clear leadership and a clear vision, and it's easier said than done, right? You just get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I was going to ask you, but I think you've just covered it. Was there a particularly impactful project or initiative that you led during your time as a senior that you specifically remember? But I think you just answered it with that. I think that's the one, really, unless there's another one that you think, no, this is the one for me.
No, it's definitely Mr. Porter.
Yeah, well,
it was definitely, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I think, if anyone that's listening to this, to see the woman now behind it, essentially, is just absolutely incredible. It's like, it's actually taken me aback. I mean, it's day to day, isn't it? It's just a household name. And, to actually know that it was you that had that initiative was just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just me.
No,
it was like,
but still.
But yeah, it was, yeah. And Mr. Paul is always going to be very special to my heart. Like it just always will be.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's been loads others that, we had when we opened the first store in Soho for Welco. That was a great event. And like a few days before, that's when I met Elle McPherson. I'm like, oh my God, here is a supermodel. I'm having dinner with a supermodel.
The body.
What is going on? Yeah, the body. And I'm like, oh my God. I was definitely starstruck. But yeah, no, it was great. And it's like, you know what? It was. And then you get to talk to them and it's like, okay, so you're human. You are human. And that was a great moment. Opening the store, having the event, all the press there. I was like, wow, this is huge.
I'm going to ask you a question around resilience because I think that this is such a crucial, attribute to have, especially in such a fast-paced world of luxury fashion. How do you maintain your focus during any setbacks or challenging times?
Well, I've been made redundant a few times.
How does that, I mean, at your level, I mean, how does that feel, and how do you get through that?
I mean, it's a shock to the system. Whether you saw it coming or not, like, it's a shock to the system. And it knocks your confidence. Doesn't matter what level you're on. It really does knock your confidence and it plays in your mind. And the first time it happened to me, I was just like, what? Like, this has never, like, I've been doing this like 15 years. This has never happened to me. And it was really hard. And then when it happened to me again, I'm like, are you joking? Like, what the hell? I think what got me through it, I had great support in my friends and my family, and even people who worked at these companies. And it was like, you know what? You're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. And you just weren't meant to be there.
Yeah.
And see this as an opportunity to go somewhere else and better yourself, and, you know, have, you know, in a company that you can grow with and you can excel in. I then, this is where the curse and net-a-porter comes in. I was always chasing the next net-a-porter in terms of like career growth and culture. And, you know, I think a lot of us who worked there were doing that. And it's just coming to that realization of like, you know what? Never going to be able to replicate that.
No, of course.
So, but bear that in mind, and then just, you know, go to the next company, go to the next position that will allow me to grow. And it doesn't matter what, you know, where you go and how far up you get, as long as you're always learning, you know, and that's what's really important. So that's what really got me. That's what kept me focused.
Yeah. And I think as
in
well,
between the breakdowns.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. But look, you know, we've all been there, you know, especially as a recruiter, I've really had to help people navigate their careers and, you know, rethink their careers, especially throughout the COVID period and everything. But there's a saying that I always use, which it's not, you know, it's not a rejection, but a redirection to something bigger and better.
Yeah.
And that's obviously clear with you.
Well, this is it. And it's like, what story are you going to tell, you know? Like, because that always plays in the back of my mind. What am I going to tell recruiters? What am I going to tell the next business? Like, what happened? Like, but the thing is, everyone's been there. Yeah. You don't realize it until it's happened to you, but everyone's been there. You know, like, but you're so great. It's like, yeah, but, you know, it didn't.
It doesn't ever mean that. It doesn't ever mean that you are not good at enough at your job or whatever. It's just what happens in business sometimes. And I think that now, you know, employers are so much more empathetic around these situations because everyone's been there, exactly what you've said. So it's absolutely fine to talk about that. You know, if you are in an interview or you are going for your next career move or whatever it is, it happens. And sometimes it is actually for the best so that you can find a new you or a new business that's going to really value what you do. And, you know, a time where you can really add so much more value to a business, which is incredible because of the experiences that you've had. So I'm going to ask you a question around, you know, your role now. And what I want to ask you is, what are the key trends and technologies that you believe are really reshaping the fashion and retail industry, especially digitally?
Well, I'm going to say it's AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it's where it needs to be at the moment for retail, but it's definitely going to shake it up. And I mean that in a good way. I think it will help with efficiency. It will help with data and making more kind of like accurate decisions and wise decisions. And, you know, even what I'm super interested in, and I believe it will shake it up. And actually, there's a few tools out there right now. It's the visual merchandising using AI.
Wow, yeah.
That have products and being more personalized. So that's, for me, that's what I kind of see is going to be, that's what's going to shake it up online. And then as well, I think from a clientele perspective, I haven't seen much out there with AI yet, but if what I see, what you can do from ecom, it can definitely help like associates become more personable with their clients.
Absolutely. I mean, I know people I speak to all the time, they're actually really scared of it, but I can only see it being positive, exactly what you said. So I'm going to ask you, how do you think it's going to sort of collaborate with the shop floor? You know, how do you collaborate with the shop floor from where you sit with digital? I know that you sort of touched upon it when you were with Wellco, but now how do you do that?
Well, we've got 3 stores in the US and they're quite boutiquey. What I'm trying to do, because I've been in this role for 3 months now, is start with the experience, and also our clients who are multi-channel, so who shop online and who shop in the store, and why do they go to the store, or why do they choose to go online and shop when they shop. So I'm looking at that right now and see what the experience is, and then from there it's like, okay, how do we then cultivate that relationship? And then I'm also, I want to look at prospects coming into the store. What are they looking for? How do they know the brand? How do they find us? What are they interested in? Can we then kind of, with our prospects that we have in like our email into our CRM system, do we then talk to them in the same way as we would talk to prospects who walk into the store? And kind of just like map out like that customer journey.
Yeah, that whole sort of overview is amazing, and it's sometimes challenging, especially because we have sales associates that are based on the shop floor that get nervous about, their clients shopping online. Is it going to take them away from coming in store? But actually, I think it's tapping across both. And if somebody's buying online now, it's a way to bring them in store, and then vice versa.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that that's definitely something I've got to kind of push as well. It's actually that customer has got a lot, it's the largest lifetime value, right? So it's also mindset with your staff and your team. It's like, then they don't just shop in store, and they also don't just shop in our store. They go to other department stores as well. So they are, they're a customer of Hanro, but they're also, customer of Saks. They come into the stores, they go online. Like there's, they're everywhere.
It's looking across your wholesale business as well. I want to talk to you specifically because this is what really fascinated me about your profile, and that's the Retail Hive. And I want you to talk to me about that and what really inspired you to become a founding member of that platform.
So when I was in England, I kind of went to a few of their events. And what I loved about the Retail Hive is it was a network where you would go to events, be a breakfast or whatever it was, and last for a few hours, and you weren't being sold to. You were sitting on a table, doing these exercises, having discussions with your peers from other brands, and not necessarily in the same department as you or what you do, but in retail. And I loved it because you learned a lot from it. And then when I came to New York, the founders were like, look, we really want to start pushing this in the US. We want to start in New York first. And then myself and someone else were like, well, you should be doing this. We can get that. Let's start a network. It is all through networking. And essentially that's when they did. It's unfortunate because the first event was in 2018 or 19, but then COVID hit, and it was such a great success. The event was it was really successful, great turnout, great conversation, great discovery, and then 6 months later COVID hit, and it was like, okay, we need to put some pause right now. So I'm still kind of I don't participate as much as I did, but it was definitely a great way of meeting new people and learning new things.
I think that's a really great option. I was looking at it before, and it's similar to a couple of platforms that I'm associated with as well. And I just think it's a great way, like you said, to be a part of something where you're amongst people and you're not sitting there being sold to, that you can just share ideas and, inspirational things and what's going on in each other's businesses. And it's always important to network within your industry anyway. But just sort of moving on, I wanted to ask you, just because you have had such an incredible career across both London and New York, what advice would you give anybody that is perhaps starting out in the digital world that looks at you and thinks, wow, that's who I want to be one day, what advice would you give them?
Persevere and have fun and make sure you're always learning. And, you know, if one job, you don't like it, you don't enjoy it, move on. Like it's definitely easier said than done, but anyone who's starting out, especially in digital, like it's always changing, but the fundamentals are the same, and they have been the same for a very long time. So yeah, just enjoy it, have fun, and make sure you're always learning.
Because we are a recruitment business, and obviously we specialise in that across all levels in the industry, I must ask you, with someone of your experience, what do you look for when you're hiring for your teams?
I look for someone who is honest, who isn't going to feed me BS, and is and depending on the level, knows what they're doing to a certain point. But what I look for is, your personality, and are you going to be the right person? Are you going to fit into the culture of the team and the business? I don't necessarily look for yes people. I don't want you to constantly say yes to me. I want to be able to have a debate. And I want you to challenge me as much as I'm going to challenge you. And I think you can tell in an interview.
Yeah.
If that's going to be the right person.
It's really refreshing to hear, because, it's nice to know that you're hiring people that are going to contribute something that, you may not know, or that are going to challenge your thought process perhaps, because they could be right. And that's really nice to know. But a question that I must ask you, just going back a little bit, is what attribute do you think you had, or what do you think was different about you that was different to your peers that allowed you to really catapult to where you've become now?
Like I would, especially at NAT, I would go out to my one developers and be like, okay, so when are you going to do this? Like, when's it happening? When's it? I think that must have been really annoying for them. I was always honest to a certain degree of this is what I think, this is my opinion, these are the facts. And just, and also kind of bringing people together and making sure that the right people are involved, and especially decision makers. I think actually that's probably one of my biggest things that happened. It was just bringing people together, and breaking down silos.
So what legacy do you hope to leave on this incredible industry that we're a part of?
Tough question. Probably what I learned from Net-a-Porter, and doing what we can to provide a great customer experience, and always putting the customer at the heart of everything that we do. That's definitely one of the legacies that I want to be known for. And just also being a great leader and helping my teams and people grow.
What do you think then makes a great leader?
Humbleness, non-egotistic, again, transparency, and actually one of the most important factors, and I can't believe I mentioned this before, is trust.
Absolutely.
Having a leader who trusts their team.
Amazing.
Because if you don't trust your team, they don't trust you, and then you're just micromanaging.
Which is horrendous.
And who has the time to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I honestly cannot thank you enough. You are absolute inspiration, and I'm sure anybody that's listening to this that wants to follow in your footsteps is going to have a wealth of knowledge now on how to navigate that. So honestly, Mariana, thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the best with your career and with your role now at Hanro, which I'm sure you're going to make an absolute success of. So thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Have a lovely weekend.
You too. Bye. Bye.